Awesome. So with every new season, obviously, there's one thing that's constant: the beer parlor. I don't drink beer. Maybe Erasmus does a little bit. I'm not sure. Somebody was querying me as to why we named it the beer parlor if there are no beers at the table when we are having a discussion. I'm like, I'm non-alcoholic, so that doesn't apply to me. But yeah, Erasmus, how have you been? I mean, we did two episodes. One is yet to come out as we are recording this as well on the Osimhen saga. But how has the reactions to the first Beer Parlour episode of this season been from your end of things?
I mean, it's been amazing. I think the word that has been used is prophetic because some of these discussions that we had sort of
Yeah,
preceded um, the events we spoke about, which
yeah,
maybe goes to an extent to give us more credibility. But I think it's also exciting in a way to see
yeah,
that like some of these things that you are noticing and you are pointing out, like you are not just imagining them. Like
yeah,
there's actually some merit to it. But
yeah,
I think it's been and people missed it. People really missed it. So people were excited that we're back in,
yeah,
and I think people also kind of found it exciting that I was sort of speaking about Chelsea. They were like they carried the
yeah,
whole "you'll be biased," which
yeah.
you also posted in the episode. But
Well, obviously you were being biased. You admitted it in the episode, so don't put anybody on the spot. But I mean, the beer parlor has been spot on in some analysis as well, and it's been very profound. Look at last season's Champions League. I think we got all the quarterfinals predictions right in terms of who is likely to
yes,
progress. You look at this discussion that we had as well. We did an analysis on the rise of project managers and why they were being preferred, which reflected in a lot of the managerial signings that we saw in the summer window. And we had a discussion about Chelsea. And one thing that excites me is in all of these instances, the most striking ones have been in contrast to what majority of the sporting media, especially in the West, are saying. So the famous Micah Richards video and Jamie Carragher video of terribly predicting the UCL results purely based on bias and their English favorites and all that was in contrast to as we were just looking at purely the analysis of the teams and their strengths and weaknesses and predicting what the results are likely to be. And they all got their predictions wrong while we got it right. So this is not a podcast where we bandwagon on what the mainstream media is saying. And last week was an example as well. You look at Raheem Sterling's situation where everybody was pointing out it's a bad choice, don't annihilate him because you are depreciating his value and all that. And you gave a brilliant analysis on the fact that players on long-term contracts usually are unattractive on the market because nobody sees a rationale to go in for them. And so the only way to instantly generate interest from the market or to signal potential suitors is to annihilate them and make it very, very clear that you don't want them, you don't need them. So anybody who is interested in them should come for them. And that worked out. Even before the episode was published, a few hours before it was published, we saw Arsenal, I think within a day or two, sign Raheem Sterling. And
yeah,
obviously, that would have never happened if the signaling wasn't there that he was surplus
yes,
to requirements and they were
yes,
never going to
yes,
pay him as well.
yes,
And this was
yes,
entirely against the run of analysis or the run people in football call a run of play as to the trend and the bandwagon that everybody was going for. So, I mean, gradually the podcast is becoming exciting because then we are not here to just reflect what everybody is saying out there. We are here to go beyond the surfaces, and you use the economic analysis to explain why that decision was probably the best decision to take within the market window. So yeah,
yeah.
you too take your props for the Raheem Sterling analysis, but the bias analysis on Chelsea, no props from that one.
I mean, it does prove that my bias has no play here. But I think this is also the only podcast where we can spend our introduction just jerking off and talking about how good we are. But I
Yeah,
think one of the reasons that just I think we are able to see that side of things is because a lot of the punditry, and you give the example of Jamie Carragher and co having to give their results. A
yeah,
lot of punditry now is rooted in a lot of commercialization,
yeah,
and that commercialization is dependent on fan appeal. So I
yeah,
think the way in which broadcasters are framed now, they are not framed to think of themselves as objective analysts who need to come
Yeah.
to the table and bring the good points and analysis. They are there to also entertain you because of the
Yeah.
competition that comes from other broadcasters, the competition that comes from other pundits and other channels.
Yeah.
And given they also need to compete within a social media space, which requires attention, they play to the gallery. So we saw the rise of bandwagoning. But what
Yeah.
people also don't realize is that there's a long-standing tradition of sensationalization
Yeah.
and media platforms who were just sensationalists. Like everything they said just didn't make sense. So
ESPN.
now ESPN is that kind of guy. And you think, okay, no, it's destroying their reputation. No,
No, it's
no,
not.
they
Yeah.
profit from that
The
reputation.
profit.
And that's why when a company is not benefiting from something, they are going to cut it off immediately.
Yeah.
It means that it makes them money, and that's
But if
why
you
they
look at
continue
it,
to.
like in football, hate sells to except to the fans that your hatred is targeted at. It sells to everyone else
Mm.
because of the rivalry that
It's the
exists.
guaranteed audience. It's the
Yes,
guaranteed audience.
if you hate on United on ESPN, every other club would support whatever you are saying and would say, yeah, these
Yes.
guys are the ones doing the correct analysis. If you hate on Chelsea,
Yeah.
every other club will support you. So it's like you just probably harm one group, but then the larger
Mm.
majority stays on your side because of the rivalry
Yeah.
from the guaranteed audience that you
No,
have.
so it's they rely on the doom thread, which essentially is what all news relies on.
Yeah,
Because usually within the news cycle, what helps is that you are not sure which news will be the most interesting. Like
yeah,
almost everybody can guess what will be that something will be interesting, and there's a variation in the level of competition between those pieces of information. So
yeah,
people freely look for things which excites them, and you find something and it's exciting, then there's a small bandwagoning effect.
yeah,
But when they are sure that there's a particular subject that in the next couple of days is going to gain everyone's attention, the
yeah,
strategy is to pivot there. And
yeah,
that's why these days we are seeing a lot more online abuse of clubs.
yeah,
And because people talk about fandom, and it's a two-way problem, because
yeah,
this level of craze and fandom is good for corporations.
yeah. It's
We have more attention on football now more than ever. Imagine, at first, as a Chelsea fan, I probably just watch Chelsea and I go away. Now, this level of fandom, even having to hate other clubs,
means
means that I need to be following the whole league. I need to
yeah,
understand the whole structure shape before I can engage in that.
yeah,
So it pulls you more into the culture rather than you being a casual fan.
yeah,
Casual fans don't spend money.
yeah,
When you go to the viewing center, or when you have to buy DSTV and you have to add football and there's an additional cost, or you have to take
yeah,
an extra Skype, you will not do it. But when you are in the thing, so it is a culture that is now being encouraged,
yeah,
and we are pulling everyone in. And then unfortunately, the hating of people has become the trendiest thing that the media wants to necessarily propagate. So if everyone is piling on Chelsea, or what are they doing? No
you
one is
go down.
actually taking the time. No
Yeah,
one is saying, can we call someone? Can we talk to
yeah,
someone? Does
yeah,
someone know the club? Who are the sporting directors? Can we speak to them? Maybe you get someone who will do it later.
yeah,
But in that particular moment, there's zero interest.
yeah,
People are not thinking, what if maybe it's a sensible decision? What do I see? They'll
yeah,
say, okay, maybe they know what they're doing. I don't know. But everyone needs to pilot in that direction. And that's why I think
yeah,
panditry is destroyed, because you are playing to the gallery. You
yeah,
are playing to the gallery. You just want the loudest people on your side.
yeah. But I think there are other benefits to this. And before I mention this, let me say um, that's also why on the shaft, a lot of the time we don't instantly react to things. Sure, we stay within a time frame of relevance, but we don't do something pops out today, talk about it today. Because a lot of the time, you never get the full story up until 2 days, 3 days later when the most relevant details have been fleshed out. And so we give ourselves some time within which the issue is still relevant. We gather the needed information and then come and talk about it. That way, you are also trying to evade a lot of just mere doubling down, which also helps us because then we're
Yeah.
able to understand things in ways that are much more deliberate than just trying to follow the trend or be sensational about it. But I also wanted to point out that the fans being drawn into the culture of football is also improving the reverse of exactly what you are saying in terms of protection of players. Because obviously there are some virtual abuses or online abuses that happen, but now there's also the potential for that player not to feel alone, because there's a section of fans that would always stand behind them and actively call out whoever is bullying. Secondly, also increases accountability on the football management and owners as well. Because in the past, we've seen several stories where player power is so inefficient that fan and clubs structurally bully them. Now, because fans have access to information that they can comment, and based on things they see, they can decide to boycott games, to protest, and all that. Football hierarchy is also cautious of how they deal with players. I mean, recently we've seen certain extremes of it, or what you would call the most recent extremes of it, like issues with Osimhen, like we've seen with Raheem Sterling, like we saw with Jadon Sancho at Manchester United, etc. But even in all those instances, there's been decorum. Probably the worst you would hear is a club saying, "We won't play you and you are surplus to requirements." But it's not actively abusing the player. And so, because they know fans are watching, fans are paying attention, now that accountability is much more intense, and that helps make the game better.
Okay, so I'll address two things you said here.
Yeah,
Like the first was about like the shaft's relevance and why we are not updating on trends. Just something quick to add there.
yeah,
I think the way in which we view this podcast, especially when we started it and the spirit in which we started it, was in a sense like also an outlet
yeah,
to be able to let out what we think, because we thought
yeah,
quite differently from the masses a lot.
yeah,
And a lot of times you just felt, is it me or this doesn't make
yeah,
sense?
exactly.
So yeah, so I legit don't care about how late we jump onto an issue.
Yeah,
I'm willing to be the crazy prophet. I'm willing to be the guy that maybe a
see
hundred
what
years from
everybody
now,
doesn't see.
um, yeah,
Yeah,
everyone discovers and it's like, oh, who is this guy? He was saying some sensible stuff, and then I'll be right then. I don't care. But I think that the idea should be there so that when someone thinks about it, they'll know like
they
they
are
were
right.
not alone in that
Yeah,
regard. Like this is how the world should have worked. Like a critique of what like is happening right now. Who is speaking to these things? And I do think that maybe there's someone out there writing papers on these things.
yeah,
Someone is out there writing about stories of abuse to
yeah,
sporting professionals. One day there'll be an expose, and
yeah,
players, because haven't we seen it now?
yeah, yeah,
People in basketball coming out to talk about their past experience. One day you hear it in football. There'll be a documentary, and you will hear of the abuses. You hear of
yeah,
some of the stuff that happens behind the scene. It is that things happen behind the scene, and you need to sort of try and imagine and understand what goes on. The
yeah.
second thing I wanted to address right before it skips me is uh, oh God, I missed the thoughts.
No, but
I missed the thoughts.
just to help you out, I was talking about the accountability in football based on
Yes,
how much
yes.
the fans are.
Yeah, and I think what I just wanted to say to that was that I agree with you. The problem now is that there is a facade of control given to fans.
Yeah,
I think the reality is different. The fan experience and fans, when they got into the at first, everyone thought the fan is the king.
yeah,
Corporations say to keep you going, to keep you happy, to keep you feeling important. No,
yeah,
it's never true. It's never true. And they know that. We've seen it quite recently, fans protesting and
yeah.
just
Massive
nothing happening
changes.
because
Yeah,
they just won't do it. They sometimes do the optics, switch one, two, three things, run PR campaigns, and now there are talks of clubs who own bots and who use media PR propaganda to sometimes drive out players and things. And we've seen it being done. Clubs just come out to talk about a player and say we don't like them anymore, or leak it to the press
yeah,
and some kind of shady things. So I think there's an illusion of fan control within football. We think we have so much power. The worst we always can do is to say we are not going to go to games anymore,
yeah,
and it won't be forever. I think yes, people do care if maybe the football club is not doing well, fans are not coming in, yeah, because they are not getting money.
yeah,
But especially when they can make money and they know that they will still fill up the stadiums, they know that they will still get viewership. The broadcasting rights is already cut, the money is already allocated for the year for them.
yeah,
Like, what are you talking about? Of course, they think about the sustainability, but always in the short term, they know that their patience in their strategy would win out over your anger.
Yeah.
So if they can always prolong it, they would always go for that option and never care about the kind of anger that you show towards your decisions. And that's why Chelsea, we saw a lot of backlash. And it's not that they've not done bad things, but
Yeah.
nothing changed. Strasbourg protested against the sale of their club. Nothing changed. Man United Glazers protested. And the worst we can do is protest and say we
Yeah.
are not going to go to the stadium anymore. But it would get filled. You
Yeah.
know, you and I know it would get filled.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but in the end, obviously there are structural issues, but improved accountability is obviously also better than zero, or at least the knowledge
Yeah.
of the wrongs are still better than
Yes.
the ignorance of them. So that's helpful. It's been 15 minutes into the conversation, and fun fact, we are here to welcome everybody to the chat. So guys, welcome to the TheShaftPodcast. This is another episode of the Beer Parlour. The main focus of this episode is what we are now moving on to. What you heard earlier is just us having a pretext discussion,
You don't need to tell
which
them, they
which,
know.
which I'm sure
They're
you
probably
enjoyed,
what's wrong with these guys?
which I'm sure you enjoyed, because at this point you are thinking, yeah, they advertised a title. I'm not hearing what they said they were coming to talk about here. So let's delve right into it. UEFA Champions League draw happened just a few days ago, and this season, from this year onwards, the UEFA Champions League is going to be a new format. Obviously, the most popular thing you'd hear now is that the group stages have been changed from group stages to a league format and all that. We'll talk about the technicalities in there, but initial reactions, Erasmus, what have you seen in terms of, or what have you heard people's comment in terms of even the decision to try and change anything about the current format? Or what do you think were the cries from the past that ignited the decision to try and change this format to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, the word to describe it is confusion. I don't think people's reaction to it has not been, oh, I definitely don't like it.
Yeah.
I think people's reaction is just more of,
Was this necessary?
wait, yeah, was this necessary? Is this right? But I think UEFA has significant reason to believe that there are more people disengaged from football these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's probably also because there is popularization of other sports and brands do have options now.
Yeah.
And those other sports allow for some flexibility within the sports. For example, the NBA is one of the most flexible sports in the world because they are keen to amend rules, keen to change things just so it allows them to stay competitive,
Yeah.
which obviously is a good strategy for them because, like, I think compared to other major sports in America, NBA is probably not number one, so
Yeah.
they needed to be more agile. So I think football is trying to be more agile. They are trying to attempt to make changes that respond to fans, which sort of might be a bit contrary to what I said in the beginning. But
Yeah.
the football regulating body, at first they were shielded from the affairs of things. They didn't need to answer anything. You probably didn't even know the job they did, right?
Yeah.
But now, because of fans' increased presence and power and cult following, people
Yeah.
are questioning such bodies. People are asking for accountability in some sense, like you said. And also, they also do realize they need to stay competitive in order to compete for sponsorship and funding against other sports, which are probably more agile.
Yeah.
So they have reason to believe that the current format is not exciting because it becomes predictable. One person just wins. I also think it's because of a lot of chatter around small teams. Like, a lot of small teams are gaining power and are
Yeah.
beginning to question things a lot. They are like small teams are earning so much more than previously before because of the huge inflation within the transfer markets. Like,
Yeah.
small teams can come to the windfall and be able to improve their teams massively and
Yeah.
increase their revenue and change. So I think there is some broader consensus that there needs to be a level of inclusivity. Yeah, because I think some of these matches that will be played would send some good teams to certain stadiums out there in the world that
Yeah.
probably would never have seen before.
Yeah.
Because it also gives more matches, which means that those clubs get to play more matches and then earn more revenue.
Yeah.
So it's sort of UFA's response to an inclusive thing. As to if it becomes wholly inclusive, I'm not sure, but I'm just trying to say that there's
That's
a reason
rationale.
for why they
Yeah.
want this change, and I think they have made an effort to try and explain it and make sure that everyone understands. I think
Yeah.
they've done very well on the PR side, because usually in football, if any change is coming, this is not the first time t- they've baited us with a change. They always say it. They look at the backlash, then they withdraw. Because with football, you also don't want to disconnect the fans totally. You
Yeah.
don't want to lose the core fans.
Yeah.
So anytime they see a reaction from the core fans, they dissociate. But this has not received that ruckus from core fans. It's mostly been players who've complained about scheduling.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're a player, no one is listening to you. Like no one cares about you because you probably earn 320,000. So they complain, but they themselves even can't complain out of their chest. Clubs are complaining just a bit, but they will be fine. They are not. They will just sign more players. So UEFA has just managed to be able to push a narrative that's and make a lot of effort to make people not too resistant to the idea. So it means that what most people are is just confused. They're like, okay, let me wait to see how it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar reactions to what I see from people. But I wanted to ask one thing that people have speculated might have triggered this, or at least fast tracked this as well, is the attempt by the Super League. And
Yeah.
especially now that there's been a ruling that says UEFA doesn't have a monopoly on European competition. And so the Super League is a legal league, a legal entity that can establish a competition outside of Europa and UEFA and all of its competitions as well. Does that have something to play or have something to do with this whole attempt to make it more inclusive, more matches, more revenue, more appeal?
Yeah. I think yeah, that's probably very, very true. Because I mean, I always say that, like, they always throw in ideas out there to see
Yeah.
people's reaction and all of that. But they've also, especially like the old guard,
Yeah.
like UEFA, FIFA, and co. It's made up of old, and any old guard dynamic is usually very, very
Yeah.
dangerous anywhere, because they have a perception of football and want to protect it in
Yeah.
some way. They have like an old way, and usually that is very true of institutions in general, especially institutions that set guidelines, like
Normally.
the thing,
Yeah.
yeah, rules and constitution, like legal stuff, is that like they just try and not to be too rapid or too aggressive with change, tend to be very conservative. But that also has been part of the problem. So even though people are complaining, they've never really been bold with solutions. So I think the Super League jolted them in one way or another. For now, they have a tiny victory because, well, majority of,
The
like,
clubs put it
yeah,
down.
yes, majority of the clubs, fans, everyone, we don't like FIFA or UEFA, but the thought of anybody else just feels
Fishy.
strange.
Better
Yes,
the
the
devil
thought
you
of
know.
anybody, yes, the thought of anybody else feels strange. So
Yeah.
I think UEFA has been very, very successful at pointing to the Super League as, it's the bad, scary wolf that will come and tell you all the sweet things, but would
Yeah.
lead you to doom.
Yeah.
And football fans also, in a way, are conservative. Like when they changed the FIFA game, do you know the number of people who have stopped playing FIFA? I
Yeah.
mean, they got new audience, which sometimes the trade-off is good, but the number of people who just stopped
Massive.
because now it's not like Juventus on the
Yeah.
thing, or and those kind of changes. So I think that a lot of football fans and a lot of people in general are status quo bias, and that is what is helping uh, UEFA currently.
Yeah.
So, the next step of that is obviously now saying, "Oh, they told you that we will not give you more revenue. They told you we will not give you
Yeah.
change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we'll do this."
We'll
I would
do
like
this.
to think
Yeah.
that specific competition forces them to do so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I'm making us have this pretext discussion is that when I'm going through the format, the new format, we'll then be able to look at the detailed analysis of this format and see whether it satisfies any of the concerns that actually led to the proposition of the format to be here. But finally, before I go to the format, there's one thing you mentioned about UEFA and football regulatory organizations being pretty much conservative about changing things. Football and let's see, like the English Premier League, even not just the English, several footballing organizations have also been critical of change as well, right? Because usually the difficulty is people are used to certain standards. But more importantly, anytime new standards are introduced, the initial phases of application very vague, very problematic. They cause a lot of trouble and mistakes before they learn from those mistakes as they evolve and then better the rules, which means for, let's say, the first 2, 3, 4 years of a new rule, it's much more trouble than progress. VAR, case in point, the English Premier League is a clear example. Certain rules about referees not raising their flag immediately there is an offside, but they should wait for a phase of play to end before they raise their flag. People have been complaining about those rules and those changes that are happening. Is that to say that having an organization that's actually conservative is better for the game of football? Because even though they make changes, they are very hesitant and would probably only change if there's a high barrier of justification, a high bar of justification for it. And that means that at least there's less turbulence in the game compared to if there's more changes, then more things are going wrong at the same time because they are all in the initial phases and you have less stability in the practice or in the rules of the game.
Yeah. So I think it's, for me, generally, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Even outside of football, like most institutional most institutional, what do you call it, rules, regulations,
Yeah.
just need to stay as they are, not subject to petty change. I think there is a potential for abuse also when we give them the power to be able to quickly change things.
Yeah.
So there's a deliberate effort to make it very, very hard to do the change. So it's not just a product of the individual thinking, like I was alluding to. I think systematically there are structures which forces them not to be able to change things.
Yeah.
So UEFA can't come and say, "Oh, we are removing the offside rule,"
Yeah.
because we don't think it's beneficial. Like they shouldn't be able to do so.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be able to do so. So I think it's generally good when you do it that way, because then it limits bad actors from
Yeah.
being able to take advantage of the system. So the question is if there is a good trade-off between that posture
Yeah.
versus the advantages that we get from good change.
Yeah.
And I'm on the side of conservatism because we overestimate the value of good change. Not in a way that I can objectively say that we overvalue it.
Let me just chip in here.
let-
Probably not overestimate the value, underestimate how turbulent it would be to get to that value.
yes. Yeah, I think I need to reverse the statement. I think we underestimate how much it takes to be able to get it right.
Yeah.
Like, getting it right takes a lot,
A
and
whole lot.
the probability of even getting it right is also usually very, very small.
Yeah.
So if change must be achieved in a sure manner, it means that it is going to be very slow. So, for example, people are talking about cryptocurrency taking over the world and taking over fiat currency, and they're like, it's happened because gold was phased out.
Yeah.
It takes a lot
A lot.
for people to get consensus and say you do this. And I think that is right, because when it is changed, it fundamentally changes
Yeah.
the way in which people interact and operate with that particular thing. It can break it at the structure that it's no longer recoverable.
Yeah.
And there is nothing that hurts than something that you've known which doesn't exist anymore. Like, if you didn't know it, it was better.
Yeah.
So I think football agencies in that should be quite slow in doing it.
Yeah.
I think they are quite good at implementing small changes, and they are quite good, if I think about it in terms of constitutional law, norms, bylaws, things like that. I think they've dealt well with like implementing some of these changes with bylaws, etc., and knowing when to respond. Like these days, they are doing quite well, if
Yeah.
we're being honest.
I mean, you mentioned one thing. I'll just throw a random jab and I'll continue my submission. But you said there's nothing more painful than something you've known that no more exists. It sounds like the song of a Chelsea fan who knew the Abramovich era. But anyway, let's let's move on. So let's talk about the new UEFA format, the new UEFA format for the Champions League, the Europa League, and the Conference League. So these changes are not just to the UEFA Champions League; it's also to the European League and the UEFA Conference League. But technically, come to think of it, it means Chelsea is playing UCL this season. Is it?
Possibly, we are in Europe. Who would
guys
know
are,
the difference?
you guys are playing UEFA Conference League. It's UCL, so who cares? You guys
Yes,
can count
yeah.
yourself as still in the UCL anyway. But yeah, if you talk about the format, initially we had a 32 team group stage. Now it's being changed to a 36 team league phase, which means that instead of having 125 matches in the group stage before, now there are 189 matches in the group stages, right? And so each team will be drawn against 8 different opponents, except for the Conference League where you are drawn against 6 opponents. So for Chelsea, for instance, you'll be playing 2 less matches than the other teams in the Europa League and the UEFA Champions League. Now you play 4 of them at home, you play 4 of them away. For the Conference League, you play 3 at home, 3 away. And the opponents, much more importantly, are split across the top through the middle to the bottom teams. So UEFA has a ranking, a coefficient ranking of the best teams in Europe, which means you play, I think, at least 2 teams in the top rankings, the top 8 rankings. You play another set in the middle block, and then you play another set in the bottom block. And you mentioned something as well. This is mainly because in the group stages, it's usually very easy to know which 2 teams are progressing because it's like
Yeah.
2 extremely good teams, usually against 2 poorly ranked sides. And so what that means is that almost all the time, smaller teams do not have an advantage or have very, very limited chances of making it through to the outer stages of the league. But now what you have is that you have very high profile matches, even right from the group stages, again, which is meant to generate more interest, right, within the matches. Because Manchester City's campaign, up until I think the semi-finals last season, was so boring because
No
you
one
could
was.
literally predict. Nobody was watching. You could predict, and UEFA is seeing that effect. And so now this UCL format is meant to change that as well. And so what this means is that the teams that finish from first to eighth in the league phase would automatically go to the round of 16. From ninth to 24th would play a knockout phase where they do a playoff and then an additional top 8 from those who win the playoff join those who were seeded and they form the round of 16 teams. Now, if you lose that knockout stages, you probably go to the lower league and play a playoff there, like Barcelona dropped into the Europa League some time ago. But also, if you ranked from 25th to 36th in the league, you are knocked out from all competitions. So you don't get any comeback option. And in the knockout stages as well, all ties are still home and away, and the final is a single leg match. Now, what this means with a league format is picture it in the sense of what happens within the Premier League or whichever league your team plays in. Every match, every goal, every statistic, every fixture counts because now you are not just competing against 3 other teams in your group. You are competing against 35 other teams who are there, who are also top teams who are trying to rank up and down. And so you lose a point, you probably drop like four places. Similar to what happens in the high stakes leagues where a point can change you from 8th place to 10th place or 11th place because of how competitive other teams are being. And so the goal of this has been to make it much more unpredictable, much more competitive right from the group stages, and make it much more exciting. But also, like you said, increase the number of matches, increase revenue for the UEFA teams as well. So this is the new format. And I don't know whether you think, and here's where I'll start the questions. Do you think this format at least improves on the previous format in tackling the very issues that led to the decision to try and change the format?
So I do think that the previous formats did have its challenges.
Yeah,
Like you were saying, for example, Man City getting to play some of these matches where it is absolutely predictable. They are a juggernaut. They're going to run through all of them.
yeah,
It, I think it used to come with some pedigree, getting like all points out of the group stage, um, like going perfect within the group stage. But now we're seeing teams do it consistently. Like throughout every campaign, we can have two, three teams finishing on perfect score.
yeah,
So all these things, I do think reduces the excitement to a certain degree because football in itself is changing. The dynamics between teams in itself is also changing. Like we've seen teams like come through to come and excite us so much. Like there were some legendary teams within the Champions League, like Shakhtar Donetsk will come there and would like spring a surprise and things like that. But these days they come there receiving the same traction. Teams are trying to step up, and teams invest a lot to be able to compete for the Champions League. That's
yeah,
something that probably may not be very clear because the kind of caliber of players they need to sign once they switch to the Champions League needs to be different. The kind of football they even need to play because the area of competition that you most likely have
yeah,
is radically different. So they invest a lot to do so. So they do, in fact, deserve a chance to have some level of success. And there are times where you can even predict what everyone will place and what the score will be because you can almost predict
yeah.
the outcome of these matches. I know the Betway people would disagree with me, but
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, because we have seen some unpredictabilities and it's
yeah,
nice, but maybe can we see this on a consistent basis and especially
exactly.
within the Champions League, I think it's reducing a
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
Another theory also is that it's just because Madrid is winning it so much. But
No, but that's the thing. Anyway, I disagree with the whole.
no, of course, I disagree with it. It's
If
foolish.
Madrid is winning so much, they will still enter that knockout phase, and they will still do their useless juju again. So it doesn't matter. But I think now there are much more high-profile matches in the group stage where you
Mm,
have the top clashes happening, and it's happening across multiple games. So it is much more exciting and it's much more thrilling as well. And so that's mainly the new UCL format and Europa and UEFA Conference League format. I think people are looking forward to much more inclusion. The only other slight change is the qualifications, where now they are looking at the coefficients for a calendar year to determine who takes up the extra spots as well. And so, for instance, you can taking the English Premier League as an example, you can have a situation, the very ideal situation, where 7 teams from England qualify for the Champions League. That is if the
mm,
winners of the UCL and Europa are both from England but didn't make the top 5 in the league, and
automatic.
the yeah, because of automatic qualification, and then the top 5 league rankings also qualify because that coefficient from their season's performance favor them with the 5th spot. And this obviously is a same thing scenario for all the other leagues. It is highly unlikely, but it's a theoretical possibility that exists for all of these clubs, which means that now when people are playing in European competitions, they know that it's not just their individual performances, but it could also improve the chances of they themselves qualifying for the UCL if they place 5th in their league. And so they need to do better in Europe because then that influences the coefficient that they
Yeah.
use to get into Europe, which is like Dortmund. Dortmund was, I think, 5th in the Bundesliga, and they making the final secured the coefficient for 5th spot to be given to the Bundesliga as well. So they literally secured their own spot in the
On
UCL by doing that. And so they look at that as also a motivating factor for teams to be much more aggressive and much more ambitious in Europe.
yeah, I do. Yeah, I do think that like this new structure is well thought out, and that's why the critics have been silenced to a degree. Because
Yeah,
when these guys do changes, it usually has this
heavy
agenda
critique.
behind it.
Yeah,
But I think this time, I don't think the agenda has gone away. But I think that they've been able to find a real problem and
Yeah.
they've made a good attempt at trying to solve it, which is not like an attempt to defend FIFA because UEFA, because like their reputation has just been on the low. But I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I'm yet to go back because I used to listen to those kind of things like scandals, what's happening behind football. So maybe it would be good to go back and go and listen to what's the state of it now before I defend them. But from just an observer standpoint, you
Yeah.
can see that they're making some efforts to
Yeah.
try and grow the game, like give some of the smaller clubs access and competition.
Yeah.
So I think that I want to see how it looks like. I'm actually quite excited by the kind of games you're already seeing.
Yeah.
Obviously, not by the Chelsea games, but um, with the Champions League, some of the
Yeah.
pairings I've seen have been exciting, and I think that's also doused
Yeah.
some of the
Yeah.
doubts which people had. I mean, the only major argument I've seen against this, like I was saying, was that players are going to get injured. But I think progressively, you are going to find more and more teams building up their squads, and that's why teams like Chelsea are stacking up a lot of talent.
Yeah.
So teams that just are not able to strengthen would suffer, and that
Yeah.
maybe goes back to the same problem because smaller clubs are not able to afford larger squads. You can't keep good players on a smaller salary, and not every team needs that balance of having people that they just pay less, right? Yeah, if and sacrificing the quality in that regard. So there might have to be some rule adjustments with that. Like,
Yeah.
then are we going to see an increase in the number of squads, especially when they qualify to Europe? Are we going to see uh, clubs being supported, for example, to be able to improve themselves, like giving that resources to do
Yeah.
so? Without doing that, I think it becomes cyclical to a
Yeah.
degree. That the player welfare thing is not just about high profile players,
Yeah.
because this is the problem I have with people who say a player earns this amount of money, so don't care about them. I agree. If a player earns that kind of money, there are lots of things for which I won't care about them, and that is fine because I would think in the worst case I'll be concerned about someone when
Yeah.
like they are really desperate,
Yeah.
right? But they are not desperate, so maybe it douses my sympathy a bit. I think what people lose sight of is that the number of people who are earning those kind of wages are very, very small. There are
Yeah.
a lot of footballers who are also just living sustainably,
Yeah.
and some of these practices, rules, regulations trickle down to some of the lower grassroots footballers who earn a living, like they just do it like it's a job,
Yeah.
or they just do it as a side passion. And I'm even talking about professional players. Sometimes
Yeah.
professional players who play for some clubs don't earn
As a
like a
side.
lot, and some of these things do impact them. Yeah, not even as a side. Some professional players who just do it exclusively, and because you recognize that they won't work after their
Yeah.
um they can end up with an injury, anything. So they need to save a certain amount and all of that. And a lot of players, regardless of what you're hearing in the media, do not get to that point. So hitting a bumper contract is nice, but it shouldn't let distract us from trying to advocate for things like player welfare because it
Yeah.
still comes back to affect everyone.
And before I pass comments on the player welfare thing, which there's some, I don't know whether you were in my thoughts because that was the next thing I was going to jump to anyway. But the if you look at some of the fixtures, Real Madrid, for instance, will be playing Dortmund, Liverpool, AC Milan, Atlanta, all the group stages. Look at Manchester City, they'll be playing Inter Milan, PSG, Juventus, all in the group stages. You look at Barcelona will be playing Bayern Munich, Dortmund, Bayern Munich, Dortmund. Um, is it Dortmund? Yeah, Bayern Munich, Dortmund, Atalanta, all in the group stages. You look at Liverpool be playing Real Madrid, RB Leipzig, Bayer Leverkusen, AC Milan, all in the group stages. Look at AC Milan is playing Liverpool, Real Madrid, Bayern. So the Arsenal is playing PSG, Inter, Atlanta. Leverkusen is playing Inter, Liverpool, AC Milan, Atletico Madrid, Salzburg. So the games are classic in the group
Yes,
stages, like
yes,
heavyweight clashes ongoing on even right at the group stages as well. And this one, it's
wow,
like whoever is playing some of those heavy games at home, now the energy is behind you because the other party doesn't get the advantage of an away for that exact same
yes,
match.
yes,
You get an away
yes,
for another match but not that exact same match. So if you
So
score
no
the
revenge, no chance for
no
revenge.
revenge anywhere. So it's
Do you think that
exciting.
people have? I mean, I've not seen a lot of pushback against the away thing. I
Yeah,
think it's cool. I don't. I personally find the concept of home and away sometimes annoying. Like,
yeah.
imagine you play this team and next week you have to play them again.
I think it has its perks and its downsides. Um,
Mm,
what usually made it very, very exciting was the away goals. They took it away,
yes,
and now it's more like
yes.
two plain matches. So
So
what really is
we
the
just won 80 minutes. Yeah,
yes,
180 minutes to
one
score more
eighty
goals.
with no drama, with nothing like exciting about it and all that. But I get it. UEFA can also not change everything about the Champions League. It's one of the things that makes
Yeah,
the Champions League exclusive, where the
yeah.
initial phases there is no home and away. In the semi-finals, there is home and away, which means that every fan of every club who is there gets to support their team at home for
Which,
the classic
which
games. Right?
which just sorry to cut you short, which I think makes more sense in my opinion because
Yeah,
like if Man City is going to, I don't want to mention any team's name, but if Man City is going to one of the smaller sides, it's quite clear that the away fans, the impact they can have
yeah,
there is almost negligible.
yeah,
Like whether it's home and away, you take it.
yeah,
Once in a while, can we see one of those upsets where maybe Pep decides not to play all of his players? Yes. But if the points are crucial, he will be playing them anyway.
yeah,
So if this keeps the away fans for very, very close games, I think I'm fine with it.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, it seems like a very exciting format. It seems like a well thought out format. We are yet to
Mm,
experience it, obviously, for the first time in this UCL campaign that's about to start, and hopefully, it gets exciting and it really lives up to expectations for most people. I'm also personally just looking forward to how the Super League responds to to UEFA and the UCL competitions because I like rivalry, and I just want like knowing that that threat of Super League is pushing them to do right. I just want that threat to intensify a bit more and see them
no,
appeal to clubs more.
no, I don't. I don't like. Maybe this is also status quo bias and the devil
Yeah.
you know type shit. I just think that I wouldn't want to live in a fractionalized
No, no, don't
football
get me wrong.
environment.
I don't want the Super League to happen. I think they've
I mean,
just been
and I yeah, yeah, I think
I
that
want them
the
to be a
push
little
for
bit
it,
active
yeah,
so
yeah,
that
I
we
think the
able to
push for it
strengthen the base.
might no, I think my point is that I think their strength and existence and resilience is likely going to motivate a lot of people because we saw it happen within golf. So golf, PGA golf was I think was the exclusive rights. It was like the god of golf.
As
In
in
fact,
when
I
they
never heard of
start, then other entities could also rise up
yeah.
and try
So
to take all of
I think there was an I don't know what the full story is. I need to check, but I think there was a story of someone trying to challenge, and then they had like Saudi backing,
yeah.
and it was like no, they cannot take it. They pushed it back. It created it. Now
What
today they are merged.
is it tennis
Today they are merged.
or something? There's also a similar story in tennis where now there's a world's competition in Saudi and they've been very competitive as well. And they offer like significant benefits like they offer a base salary to athletes and they give them some
Mm,
allowances, not just based on performances, which maybe the previous organizers didn't do
mm,
because they just based on your ranking they give you an allowance. But these guys have a base salary that they give to all athletes who participate. So like that rivalry, and I think it's reflecting in the world of sports where people are now bold enough to challenge authority and say, "Yeah, we are presenting the people with an alternative," and see how you react to it. So let's see what the future holds.
yeah, let's see what the future. I anticipate that Super League might come out and like we start looking at some of the funding. Like all it requires is like one huge Saudi backing, and before you realize
Bro,
they are creating their own competitions, which will be very for me is not strange. It will be very interesting to experience as a football fan. I'll be like, what does it mean to have
what is
two
the
leagues?
what
Like
is the decision now on clubs? Can they participate in both?
yes,
You have to choose one.
because that's my
Leadership
can they
is too much.
cross compete? Yeah, can they sort of like compete in both of these? Like, would they try to have different squads to be able to compete in both leagues, or like something very crazy? Like, but I think in a world where they split out and like just one setter here, one setter here, it's going to be very disastrous because
Yeah, yeah, for
they
that
might
one.
pull everyone away.
Yeah.
Clubs will start feeling like, okay, if here is where the fun is, if here is
Bro,
where the money is, because all
bro,
it takes is two, three big clubs to move,
and you know, like
and everyone is
now clubs are much more frustrated with UEFA and FIFA and Premier League financial fair play rules and financial sustainability
yes,
rules, which
yes,
means any offer of more funding and less financial restrictions makes more business sense for clubs. And so it's not just
yes,
that you are not giving them even enough money. It's that even when they have their own money and they want to spend to achieve a certain end goal, you are limiting them and you penalize them sometimes by taking away points, like we saw with Everton, like Manchester City's 111 charges that is on them, all because of financial fair play, financial sustainability, what. And so you look at that, and clubs wanting to avoid all that stress and all those complications. If the Super League is not just offering substantially more money, but also offering less financial restrictions and more financial freedom, that could be a really enticing offer that you'd see some clubs tempted to move, even if the big clubs will not, because maybe they get the big money from UEFA. A lot of the small clubs who give UEFA also the coverage that they need will be enticed to move because at worst, what do they have to lose, really?
yeah, yeah, and I agree with you. I think a dangerous, I don't want to call it dangerous because what's wrong with um someone? But I think what I really think is happening is this. I think the Saudis also know that they can't do, and even like the Super League itself, they know they can't do a hostile takeover of football.
Yeah,
A hostile takeover of football would lead to a Pyrrhic victory.
yeah,
Everyone needs the fans.
yeah,
Like for now, the climate in which we are in, sports like football is losing a lot of fans.
yeah,
Football has actually lost no fans, even though a lot of people have become committed.
yeah,
Some people have become bored with football. So that's the climate they feel football is in.
yeah,
And usually that climate is also influenced by larger external economic conditions. So
yeah,
when you have a pandemic, inflation,
yeah.
people don't watch
Buy
football.
tickets, people
People don't
don't pay
watch.
for DSTV
Yes,
anymore, those things.
yes. So revenue drops. Revenue drops for these guys. Revenue drops in terms of corporate sponsorships.
Yeah,
Um, certain sports genuinely get an advantage. Like people retreat. First time football can be something that brings a lot of people together. But
yeah.
I'll retreat to just go and watch my own sport, like because I don't want to be paying extra
I
for
mean,
football.
if you look at the fact that club football had to resume even when COVID was still a thing, tells you how
Yes,
much difficult it was to financially sustain these clubs and their wage bill.
yes,
Because their wage bills don't go away. Players don't stop getting
yes,
paid because there is a pandemic.
yes.
And so that perpetual financial responsibility heightened their financial need during COVID, such that we had to see situations where clubs were forced to play, travel
Yes.
in the height of COVID. Some players had to sacrifice having to risk COVID and getting COVID and being out for periods of time, all because they
Bruh.
needed these media funding and the streaming gigs and all that.
Yeah, well, I think one day the players should come out and talk about this because playing within COVID must have been horrible.
Bro,
When they speak about it, they are like they tell you
yeah,
about the level of isolation with the NBA. I think well, one of the stars of NBA, I think he plays for Miami Heat. I've
yeah,
forgotten his name, Butler, um, James Butler. I think he sort of documented the whole thing, and these guys couldn't see their family in weeks. And this is
yeah,
during COVID when you are hearing
yeah,
that people are dying
yeah.
and you can't see your family. I remember there were cases of players who snagged away from camp and went to go and see their families and got punished.
That's the
Yeah,
funny thing.
because you
YouTube.
because you would risk business going on.
Yeah, yeah. So I
Because you
mean,
risk business going on. No,
it's
I mean it's crazy. I've even forgotten the analysis that brought me to this point. But I was saying
but
that
you know how boring
these guys also know that
football have become, and why they need the fans and they need that attraction as well. So
yes, yes, yes. And that's specifically why they can't do a hostile takeover.
yeah,
Because this is the last thing football needs. So it needs to be a more coordinated, more friendly thing. And that's why I think the challenge has not, because if Super League had mounted a legitimate challenge, all this while they were like toasting the idea.
Yeah, they were just a
And
Trojan horse, really. They've just been,
yes,
like,
they've tested the system.
yeah, we'll show our face and see how you
It
guys
will
will react, and
it
just
will
go
not
back,
go away.
yeah, and plan better. But and so
Yeah,
they
it will not go
decided
away.
to first of all go and challenge the legality of it, and said they went to FIFA court, and the court of arbitration
Yes,
ruled in their favor and said UEFA doesn't have exclusivity over organizing European competitions, therefore
yes,
Super League can. They've gotten that as a primary win. Now they're like,
yes.
wait for us, let us go and cook and come back. So they've not left, but they've not shown face to.
Nah,
Now there's some suspense around exactly what they are doing. But yeah,
yeah, they definitely will come. So,
yeah,
and that's the only reason why I think they have not been very, very aggressive. If not, there would been have been a legitimate challenge where in a day you hear Barca has moved, Real Madrid has moved,
yeah,
and that's all it takes. The big clubs are the
the
what do you call it?
drivers.
The queens,
Yeah,
because once you take them, you've already got your league. Because if Madrid and Barca move, Atletico won't stay
yeah,
because all the sponsors will move here.
yeah,
So all the small clubs will go where the big club
yeah,
is.
yeah,
So, and that's why they are targeting those clubs. And some of those clubs, the frustration now is that the clubs that are for it, they are out there showing that they are for it.
yeah,
The clubs that are against it are not really telling us they're against it.
yeah.
They
They're
mostly
just
just try
saying
and
they're happy
say
where they are.
they are happy where they are. They are not really saying, "Oh, this is a
Really?
horrible idea. We will not go." So they are only just doing this because they don't want to be in trouble and they don't want to hedge their bets yet.
Yeah,
When it comes the time to hang their hats, they will leave this in a heartbeat.
yeah.
So I think that's why we've not seen something like that, but it's likely to happen.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, I mean, this has been a very fascinating conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've listened, and we hope you've watched that through to the end. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you want to see more of these, if you want to see me challenge his bias all the time, if you want to hear like very deep and detailed analysis on what's happening in the world of football, definitely subscribe, leave a
The
like,
crazy prophet.
leave a comment, and hear more prophecies from the two of us, the Beer Parlour episodes on the Shaft podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and see you on the next episode.